Ethan, a devoted father and husband, recounts the painful scars left by his mother's abandonment after his father's untimely death. As he navigates the complexities of family, loyalty, and forgiveness, Ethan must confront painful memories and fight for the future of his own family. Will he finally find peace, or will the ghosts of his past destroy everything he's built? Ethan Matthews, early 40s, a successful computer security expert, sits in his dimly lit home office, his fingers poised over the keyboard, preparing to share a story that has lingered with him for years. It's not a story of triumph or success, rather. It's a tale of profound loss and the emotional scars that linger long after the people who caused them have disappeared. The weight of his past has shaped the man he is today, yet there are parts of him that remain a child, abandoned and broken, still searching for answers. At the age of 10, Ethan lost his father unexpectedly. In the blink of an eye, his entire world shifted, leaving behind a gap that no child should ever have to face. The absence of his father was suffocating, but Ethan would soon discover that the worst was yet to come. Just months after his father's death, Claire Matthews, his mother, chose to leave them. She made the choice to return to her family in another city, leaving Ethan and his younger sister, Sarah, behind without a word of explanation. No goodbye, no reason, just silence. The abandonment was like a wound that never fully healed. Ethan couldn't understand why his mother would walk away from her own children at their most vulnerable moment. What kind of mother would leave her kids in the wake of such a tragedy? The answer eluded him for years, and the pain it caused reverberated throughout his life. It wasn't just the physical absence, it was the emotional one. The feeling that no matter how hard he tried, he would never measure up to the love he so desperately needed. As Ethan begins to open up about these painful memories, you can feel the weight of his words. He's not just recounting a childhood event, he's revisiting the wounds that shaped his view of family, trust, and love. The scars may have faded with time, but they will always remain. And with each passing moment, the question echoes in his mind, can he ever truly heal from the abandonment that defined his early years? Or will it continue to haunt him forever? Ethan Matthews can still hear the sound of his father's laughter in his mind, the way it would fill their home with warmth and comfort. It's hard to imagine that man, the rock of their family, suddenly gone. He was the protector, the guide, the one person who Ethan could always rely on. Then, in an instant, Ethan's world was plunged into darkness. His father's sudden death at a young age left Ethan and his younger sister, Sarah, struggling to understand the loss that had torn their family apart. At just 10 years old, Ethan didn't know how to cope with the absence of his father. It wasn't just the physical loss, it was the sense of security and love that had vanished overnight. His father was everything steady, strong, a constant in an otherwise unpredictable world. Losing him felt like losing a part of himself. It wasn't just grief, it was confusion and fear. How could a young child process such a monumental change in their life? The death of his father shattered their family dynamic in ways that Ethan couldn't fully grasp at the time. His mother, Claire, who had always been more of a passive figure in their home, became distant and withdrawn after his father's death. She seemed lost in her own grief, unable to provide the emotional support Ethan and Sarah so desperately needed. The bond that held their family together was no longer there, and their home quickly turned from a place of love to one of silence. In the wake of his father's death, Ethan found himself trying to fill a void he didn't know how to address. He tried to take on the role of protector, of the one who would look after his sister. But how could a child bear such a weight? How could he shield Sarah from the darkness that seemed to close in around them? As Ethan recounts those early years, you can feel the desperation in his voice, the need to understand, to make sense of a world that no longer felt safe. And just when he thought things couldn't get worse, his mother made the decision that would haunt him for years to come. She chose to leave them behind, moving back to her family in another city. This would be the moment that shattered the fragile remnants of their family, leaving Ethan and Sarah to navigate the world alone. The day Claire Matthews made her decision to leave remains etched in Ethan's memory like a cruel twist of fate. It wasn't a dramatic scene, no arguments, no harsh words exchanged. Instead, it was the kind of departure that made Ethan feel like an afterthought. His mother, who had already become distant following his father's death, quietly announced that she was going to move back home, far away from her children. Just like that, she was gone. Ethan remembers how his heart sank in his chest. He couldn't understand why his mother, who had already abandoned them emotionally in the wake of their father's death, would physically walk away as well. There was no warning, no conversation, no attempt to make things right or even give an explanation. She simply packed her things, told them she was leaving, and walked out the door. For a 10-year-old boy, the impact was devastating. It was as if the final thread of hope that his family would heal had been severed. The emotional abandonment that Ethan had already experienced now took on a new, almost unforgivable form. How could his mother leave them when they needed her most? Ethan and Sarah, at such a young age, were left to cope with the absence of both parents in different ways. Ethan's anger was palpable. He wanted to lash out, to demand answers, but all he was left with was an overwhelming feeling of betrayal. He had trusted his mother to be there for him, to help him through the storm of losing their father, but now, even that trust had been shattered. In the silence that followed her departure, Ethan found himself asking the same question over and over again: why? Why did she leave? What had they done wrong? The departure of Claire Matthews marked a turning point in Ethan's life, a moment that would change the trajectory of his childhood and ultimately shape the man he would become. The abandonment was more than a loss of a mother, it was the loss of the idea of family, of stability, of the love that should have been unconditional. As if the universe had orchestrated an unexpected twist in Ethan's life, just when things seemed to be at their darkest, the Nelsons appeared. Mr. and Mrs. Nelson, a kind-hearted couple who had been friends with Ethan's father, stepped in and offered Ethan and Sarah a place to stay. Their home was nothing like the cold, silent house they had left behind. It was warm, full of life, and radiated the kind of love and care that Ethan had almost forgotten existed. The Nelsons were everything Claire and their father had not been in the wake of loss. Mr. Nelson, with his easy smile and open arms, treated Ethan and Sarah as though they were his own children. Mrs. Nelson was equally caring, her presence in the kitchen or sitting beside them, listening to their worries, providing the kind of nurturing that Ethan had longed for. The Nelsons gave them the stability that Ethan thought was lost forever, but it never quite filled the hole left by his mother's absence. Despite the kindness they received, Ethan couldn't help but feel an undercurrent of resentment. The Nelsons were good people, but they were not his parents. No matter how much they tried, they couldn't erase the pain of being abandoned. The feeling of being unwanted was something Ethan could not shake, and no matter how many dinners he shared with the Nelsons, how many comforting words they offered, the shadow of his mother's absence loomed large. Ethan tried to make the best of his new life, but there was always a part of him that was searching for something: his mother's love, his family's unity. Every time he sat down to dinner with the Nelsons, he was reminded of what he had lost and what he could never get back. But it was in those moments of shared kindness that Ethan realized something important: love could come from unexpected places, and maybe, just maybe, he could rebuild his sense of belonging. But as much as the Nelsons offered, the question still lingered: could they ever replace what he had lost? Could anyone truly heal the wounds of abandonment? As Ethan Matthews grew older, the scars of his childhood became a silent force in the background of his adult life. The absence of his mother and the devastating loss of his father haunted him, shaping his approach to relationships, trust, and most significantly, parenting. As a young man, Ethan made a promise to himself that he would never repeat the mistakes of his past. He would be the father that his children could rely on, someone who would never abandon them, no matter what. When Ethan married Lily, a kind-hearted teacher with a deep sense of compassion, he felt like he had found the family he had always longed for. Together, they built a life in a cozy house filled with laughter and warmth. Ethan worked hard in his career, striving to provide for his family, but in his heart, his biggest priority was always to be present. His daughters, Emma and Sophie, became the focal point of his life. They were his world, and everything he did was for them. But the echoes of his own childhood still resonated in his decisions as a father. Ethan knew the pain of not having a stable home, the devastation of feeling abandoned. and he was determined that his daughters would never have to experience that same heartache. He was a hands-on father, deeply involved in their lives, always ensuring they felt loved and valued. But even in his deepest moments of joy with them, there were times when the shadow of his own lost childhood would sneak in. He often found himself wondering, was he overcompensating for the lack of love he received as a child? Or was he simply doing what every parent should do, being there for his children in ways that he himself never experienced? Ethan's approach to parenting was driven by a constant undercurrent of fear that one day something would happen, and he would fail his children the same way his mother failed him. He carried that weight every day, knowing that he could never undo the past, but hoping that he could do better for the next generation. But this burden, while filled with good intentions, often led to internal conflict. He wanted to be perfect for his children, to shield them from any harm, but at times his own unresolved pain would rise to the surface, clouding his judgment and leaving him questioning if he was doing enough. The peaceful life Ethan had built with his wife Lily began to unravel when a long-buried part of his past resurfaced, testing the very foundation of their relationship. Ethan, ever the protector, had always been loyal to his own family, his younger sister, Sarah, and even his estranged mother, despite everything. His desire to reconcile with his past and somehow mend the fractures that remained made him bend toward family expectations, even when it meant sacrificing his own happiness. It all started with a family gathering, one of those annual dinners that Ethan had once looked forward to. The Matthews family, although fractured, had their moments of connection, and these dinners were an attempt to restore what had been lost over the years. Ethan's mother, Claire, was in attendance, though the strained tension between them was palpable. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere became increasingly uncomfortable, until one sharp comment from Claire shattered the facade of civility. Ethan overheard his mother's voice, dripping with disdain, as she made a comment about Lily. The words were sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "She'll never understand what it means to keep a family together. She's too soft. She wouldn't last a day in our shoes," Claire remarked, referring to the life Ethan had built with Lily. The words struck Ethan hard, like a slap to the face. His own mother, the woman who had abandoned him and his sister, now dared to question the strength of his marriage. It was as if all the unresolved anger and bitterness that had been building over the years rushed to the surface, and in that moment, Ethan was torn between two worlds: his loyalty to his family and his loyalty to the woman he had promised to protect. Lily, overhearing the comment, was deeply hurt. Her loyalty to Ethan was unwavering, but Claire's disrespect felt like a personal attack. As a woman who had worked tirelessly to create a stable home for her children, the implication that she was weak hit her harder than anything Ethan had expected. She confronted him later, her eyes filled with frustration. "How much longer are you going to let her dictate what happens in our life? How long are you going to let her undermine our family?" Ethan found himself caught in the crossfire. On one hand, his mother had been part of his life, albeit a broken and distant part, and he didn't want to sever ties completely. But on the other hand, Lily was his wife, the mother of his children, his partner in every sense of the word. He couldn't stand to see her hurt, yet he couldn't bring himself to turn his back on the woman who had birthed him. It was a delicate balance, and the tension between Ethan and Lily deepened, as both struggled to navigate the conflicting loyalties that were threatening to tear their relationship apart. The tension had been building for weeks, but it reached its peak one evening at the Matthews family dinner. Ethan had hoped that the occasion would be different, that this time they could all sit together, laugh, and reconnect. But deep down, he feared the cracks in their family dynamic would once again widen into irreparable fissures. Claire, his mother, had shown up despite everything. Her presence felt like an obligation more than a sign of reconciliation. It was an uncomfortable atmosphere from the start, with awkward silences filling the spaces between forced pleasantries. As the evening wore on, the conversation shifted to more personal matters, and Claire's comments started to edge into territory that was far too familiar. Her criticisms were always sharp, and they cut to the core of everything Ethan had tried to rebuild. It wasn't until the end of the meal that the dam truly broke. Ethan overheard his mother, sitting with a glass of wine, speaking in low tones with an aunt about his wife, Lily. "She doesn't get it," Claire had whispered, not realizing Ethan had stepped into the hallway just outside the dining room. "She's never had to struggle. She married up. She doesn't understand what it's like to fight for a family, to make it work when everything's falling apart." Ethan's chest tightened with anger, his pulse quickening as the words reverberated in his ears. His mother was still at it, still undermining the very foundation of his marriage with Lily. It wasn't the first time Claire had shown a disregard for Lily, but something about hearing it in that moment after everything he had been through made the pain feel sharper than ever before. The rest of the family remained oblivious, unaware of the poisonous words spoken in the next room. Ethan could feel the fury boiling inside him, and though part of him wanted to burst through the door and confront his mother right then and there, he restrained himself. Instead, he returned to the table, masking his anger behind a forced smile, trying to finish the evening without causing a scene. But as the night dragged on, the tension between Ethan and Claire grew unbearable. Ethan's internal conflict was no longer a whisper, it was screaming at him. His loyalty to his mother was at war with his need to protect Lily, and that internal battle had reached a boiling point. Later, when the guests left and the house fell into an uncomfortable silence, Lily confronted him. She had heard the comment, too, and the hurt in her eyes was palpable. "Ethan, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you defend me?" The question hung heavy in the air, and for the first time in years, Ethan realized that his loyalty to his family was destroying the very relationship he had worked so hard to build. His silence had spoken louder than any words could have, and now he was left to face the fallout. The wound was deep, and the trust that had been carefully nurtured between him and Lily felt fragile. After the disastrous family dinner and the ensuing fallout with Lily, Ethan knew something had to change. The emotional rift between him and his wife had reached a breaking point, and the silence between them was deafening. They could no longer pretend that everything was fine. Ethan realized that in his attempts to keep the peace with his family, he had neglected the very person he had promised to cherish and protect above all else. His mother's cruelty had opened a wound, and now it was up to Ethan to decide how he would heal it, not just for himself, but for his marriage. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Ethan sat down with Lily in their living room. The air between them was thick with unresolved tension. Lily's eyes were red from crying, and Ethan felt a pang of guilt in his chest. This wasn't how he envisioned their life together. He wanted to be the man who stood by her, not the one who allowed the cracks in his family to tear them apart. "I'm sorry, Lily," Ethan began, his voice soft but filled with regret. "I should have defended you. I should have stood up for us, for our family. But I didn't, and I know it hurt you. I'm sorry for that." Lily's gaze softened, but there was still hurt in her eyes. "You don't have to apologize, Ethan. But I need to know that I come first to you, that our family comes first." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had spent years trying to be the perfect son, trying to rebuild the broken relationships of his past, but in doing so, he had neglected the woman who had chosen to spend her life with him. Now, he had to make a choice: continue to allow his mother's toxicity to invade his home, or set firm boundaries to protect the life he had built with Lily. "I've spent so many years trying to fix things with my mother, but I've neglected what's most important," Ethan admitted. "From now on, I'm setting boundaries. I'm not going to let anyone, especially my mother, disrespect our family. I will protect you and our children with everything I have." Lily's eyes welled up, but this time it was with relief. For the first time in a long time, Ethan's words felt like a promise he could keep. The tension in the room began to ease, and they held each other, knowing that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least they were walking it together. The emotional confrontation had not only revealed the depth of their struggles, but also opened a path toward healing. As Ethan and Lily embraced, they both knew that rebuilding their trust would take time, but they were ready to face whatever came next together. The emotional turmoil Ethan had been carrying reached a boiling point when he finally confronted his mother, Claire. The relationship between them had always been strained, but after the dinner incident, Ethan realized that it was time to address the deep-rooted issues that had lingered for years. He could no longer tolerate the disrespect toward Lily and their family. This confrontation wasn't just about defending his wife, it was about reclaiming his own peace and putting an end to the cycle of manipulation that had always seemed to follow his mother. Ethan asked Claire to meet him at a local park neutral ground, away from the charged atmosphere of family gatherings. The morning was cool, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. As Claire arrived, Ethan could sense her reluctance. She didn't understand why he was doing this, but she knew the day was coming. Ethan's determination was palpable. There would be no turning back after this conversation. "Mom, we need to talk," Ethan began, his voice calm but firm. "You've crossed a line, and I'm not going to let it slide anymore. You've made cruel comments about Lily and our family, and it stops now." Claire looked taken aback, almost defensive. "I was just trying to help, Ethan. You don't understand what I've been through. I only say these things because I care about you." But Ethan was no longer buying it. "No, you don't care about me, not in the way I need. You've always been more concerned with your own life than the lives of your children. You left us when we needed you the most. You can't just waltz back into my life and criticize the people I love." His words hung in the air, heavy with the truth he had been suppressing for years. Claire's face softened, but the old defensiveness remained. She attempted to apologize, but Ethan knew that words weren't enough. What had been lost could never be fully regained, and his decision to protect his own family was non-negotiable. "I'm not asking for your approval, Mom. I'm asking for respect. You don't get to tear down my wife, my children, or me anymore," Ethan continued, the weight of his words slowly sinking in. "If you want to be part of our lives, you need to respect us. But if you can't do that, then you'll have to stay away." For a moment, there was silence. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but this time it wasn't just because of guilt, it was a moment of reckoning. She had never expected Ethan to stand up to her like this, and for the first time she realized the depth of his pain. Ethan wasn't sure what would come next, whether Claire would change, or if their relationship would continue to deteriorate. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of control. He had set a boundary, and he would stand by it, no matter the consequences. His family's well-being came first. The final goodbye between Ethan and Claire was as emotionally charged as their confrontation had been. After their discussion at the park, things didn't immediately improve between them. Claire, though somewhat shaken, was still stubborn and resistant to change. Ethan knew he couldn't force her to change, but he also knew that he couldn't continue to subject himself and his family to her toxic behavior. Weeks passed, and Claire made little attempt to repair the rift between them. Ethan's decision to set boundaries had created an undeniable distance, but it also gave him the clarity he needed. He realized that he had to let go of the hope that his mother could ever be the kind of parent he had wanted her to be. His childhood dreams of her coming back to love and support him were unrealistic, and it was time to accept that truth. Then one day Claire called. She wanted to meet again. Ethan felt a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Was this another attempt at justifying her actions, or was this the beginning of something different? The meeting took place in Ethan's living room, his home, the place where his family found peace. Claire sat across from him, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes searching for the right words. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Claire began, her voice quieter than usual. "I never understood how much I hurt you. I was selfish, and I took my anger out on the wrong people. I can't change the past, but I want you to know I'm sorry. I regret abandoning you and Sarah. I regret how I treated Lily, and I know I've failed you as a mother." Ethan's heart tightened as he listened to his mother's words. Part of him wanted to believe her, to feel the warmth of her apology and embrace the possibility of reconciliation. But another part of him knew that words alone could never erase the years of pain. His mother had caused irreparable damage, and while he appreciated the apology, he couldn't simply let go of the hurt. "I hear you, Mom, and I appreciate you saying that. But I can't just forget what happened. I've spent my whole life wondering why you weren't there, and I can't keep living in that cycle. I've built a family of my own, and I need to protect them. I've come to terms with the fact that you may never be the mother I wanted, and that's okay. I can't change the past, but I can control my future, Ethan said, his voice steady. Claire's eyes filled with tears, and she nodded slowly. I understand, Ethan. I know I can't ask for your forgiveness, but I hope that one day we can find some peace. I'm sorry for everything. As they parted ways that day, Ethan felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was an ending nonetheless. He had made his peace with his past, and while the road ahead would not be easy, he was ready to move forward. He had a family to protect, and that was where his focus needed to be. Thanks for watching. If you've ever struggled with letting go of painful pasts or dealing with family issues, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned for more as we continue exploring Ethan's journey of healing and moving forward.